Okay, in this class we're going to continue the study of Aristotle's History of Animals. In our last class we finished up Chapter 1, and in this class we're going to begin Chapter 2. So let's get our notes ready. The title of the class is Aristotle's History of Animals. And this is class number 3, but this is lesson 2, chapter 2 of book 1. Book 1, chapter 2. Okay, so in chapter 1, we were just introduced to a discussion of the different characteristics of animals. It was no kind of scientific study. It was just a beginning to help us get started thinking about how animals are similar and different, and you know that it did get you thinking about that, right? You started to think about different parts of animals and how animals are identified. That was the point of that first chapter. Now we're going to continually get into more detail and work our way through the entire classification of animals. So we're going to go ahead and read chapter 2. We'll just read through it together, and we'll discuss any points that either need some clarification or just provoke some interest. So let's read chapter 2 of book 1 of Aristotle's History of Animals. Paragraph 1. All animals possess in common those parts by which they take in food, and into which they receive the food. So remember we talked in the last class about one way we study things is by comparing and contrasting, right? We first want to say how they're similar. We want to concentrate on how things are similar. And then once we've established how they're like each other, then we want to focus on how they differ from each other. That's a good way to study things, to understand them in relation to each other. So what Aristotle says right up front here at the beginning of chapter 2, all animals possess in common, that is, this is what's common among all animals, what they have in common, the parts by which they take in food and into which they receive it. So mouths and stomachs, as it were. All right? But these parts agree or differ in the same way as all the other parts of bodies, that is, either in shape or size, or proportion, or position. And besides these, almost all animals possess many other parts in common, such as those by which they reject their excrements, and the part by which they take their food, though this does not exist in all animals. The part by which the food is taken is called the mouth. That which receives the food from the mouth is called the stomach. The part of the body by which they reject the excrement has many names. And so what animals have in common with regard to parts is that they all have mouths, all have stomachs, and then the parts of their bodies by which they get rid of their waste have different names for different animals. Okay? But comparably they're the same. Okay? There's a mouth or a way that food enters the body. There's a stomach or a place to which the food goes. And then there's a means of excreting or removing waste from the body. Paragraph 1. Paragraph 2. The excrement, the waste of the body, being of two kinds, that is, liquid and solid, the excrement being of two kinds, the animals which possess receptacles for the fluid excrement have also receptacles for the dry excrement. Those which have the latter, that is the fluid, receptacles for fluid excrement, are not always furnished with the former. I'm sorry, I got that backwards. Those which have the receptacles for dry waste do not all have receptacles for liquid or fluid waste. All animals which have a bladder have a belly also, but not all that have a belly have a bladder. For the part appropriated to the reception of liquid excrement is called the bladder, and that for the reception of the dry is called the belly. So it's important for us to see that the part of our body where we would say food waste goes, Aristotle just refers to that as the belly, right? He refers to the stomach as the place where our food goes after we eat it. That's where digestion takes place. But as digestion takes place and the waste remains, Aristotle refers to that place as just the belly in general. And the bladder is the place where liquid waste is collected. All right, paragraph 3. Many animals possess both of these parts, and that also by which semen or seed is emitted. That means is sent out. Among animals that have the power of generation, or producing children, some emit the semen, and semen is just a Latin word for seed. Some emit the semen into themselves, some inject it into others. The former are called female, so a female is an animal that receives the seed, and a male is an animal that injects the seed into the female. In some animals, there is neither male nor female. There is a diversity in the form of the parts appropriated to this office. Some animals have a uterus. That's the organ where the fertilization takes place and the baby actually develops. Some animals have a uterus. Others have only something analogous or like a uterus. These are the most essential organs of animals, some of which exist in all animals, others in the majority only. So the essential organs, and that's the end of chapter 2. The essential organs of the animal, if you think about it, they're like the organs of life, right? They're the organs by which we grow and reproduce. We said that these principal organs that he listed, one was the mouth, the stomach, and then he said the bladder and the belly. Okay, and he explained these all have to do with food, which is necessary for life. And then he referred to what we'll call the reproductive organs. Organs that are used in reproduction. These we can call the digestive organs. Okay, so when we look at animals, when we look and study animals, let's just say you go to a zoo and there's 20 different animals there. What should you actually pay attention to understand animals? That's what this is about. What should you actually pay attention to? And this chapter tells us the most important or most essential parts of animals are the organs or the parts by which they receive and digest and excrete their food, and the parts by which they reproduce. Those are the most essential parts of animals, and they're the first parts that we should consider and study if we want to understand animals, right? So let's just take some basic examples. We have cows, right? We can think about their mouths. They have mouths, right? But once we get to their stomachs, we find that cows are completely different than humans. Cows are different from horses. Cows are different from dogs. Their stomach is different. And we can see that if the stomach is one of the most essential parts of an animal, and the stomach of a cow is different from the stomach of other animals, we see that different stomach really is essential to what a cow is. You see that? Because cows differ from horses in a part of the body that's really essential to life. You see what I mean? That difference is a significant difference, whereas there are other differences that are not that significant. For example, horse hooves and cow hooves are different, right? Horse hooves, you know what a horse hoof looks like? It's just round like this, right? Kind of shaped like that, but it's like one piece. You know, they can get a horseshoe on it, but it's like a round pad on the bottom of their foot. That's what a horse hoof looks like, but it's all just one flat surface. But a cow hoof, right? A cow hoof actually looks like this. It's two pieces. You know? And they actually separate like fingers. So if we look at the hooves of cows and horses, we'll see that they're different, but that's really not an essential, significant difference. Whereas the difference in the stomachs of the animals, that's a major difference. Horses have a stomach like ours. Cows have a series of stomachs that allow them to digest all of the grass that they eat. So they differ in their stomachs. That's a big deal. If we take another animal, let's take a pig. A pig has a mouth like other animals, nothing really special about a pig's mouth. You can look at their teeth and things like that and say maybe their teeth reveal how their diet is different. But their mouth is pretty similar. If you look in a cow's mouth, what are a cow's teeth like? What are a cow's teeth like? They're flat, right? They're flat, like a blade used to cut grass. And if you look at other animals, like a dog, what are a dog's teeth like? They're jagged and sharp. They're meant to tear. Okay? So we can see that their mouths are different, and that reveals something about what they are. Then we get to their bellies and bladders, and we can see there's differences. A pig has a stomach like us. A dog has a stomach like us. A horse has a stomach like us. A cow has a different kind of stomach. They're different. And then reproductive organs. We can think of the reproductive organs of pigs, horses, cows. They're actually pretty similar, right? When cows, pigs, horses, goats, all of these farm animals reproduce, they're pretty similar. And we can think about how they carry their babies as the babies develop. We've been with dairy cows. We know what it's like when a dairy cow is carrying a calf. Usually it's one calf. And then you've got other animals like a pig where they can carry a dozen babies, right? A dog can carry 6 or 7 babies. A goat will usually have how many? 2, maybe 1, 2, maybe 3, sometimes rarely, but usually 2, 1 or 2. But then you have pigs that can carry multiple. You have dogs who carry multiple puppies. So you can see that generation, which means that them creating new life, reproducing, it's different from one animal to the other. And we have to, when we see that, we have to ask why. Why do pigs make 12 babies and cows make 1? People usually make 1, right? Sometimes 2. Sometimes there's multiple births at once, but usually it's 1. Cows usually 1. Goats usually 2. Pigs can have 10. Dogs can have 5 or 6. So we see that difference. We have to ask, why would that difference exist? What does that difference teach us about these animals? Right? You understand that? We don't just want to look at the animals and compare them by their color or by the kind of fur that they have. We want to look first at their essential organs and compare them, because since these are essential organs, if they differ in these, that's an essential difference. That's an important difference. And it probably explains the difference between the animals. Okay? So that's all for Chapter 2. So in Chapter 2, make sure you can identify what these essential parts of animals are, that pretty much all animals have these parts. The parts by which they take in food, by which they process food, and by which they excrete waste. Learn some of these vocabulary words too. To excrete means to pass out. Excrement is that part of the food that animals get rid of. The digestive organs, make sure you know what the essential digestive organs are, and then the reproductive organs, what the reproductive organs are. Okay, so that's what Aristotle introduces to us in Chapter 2, the essential organs of animals. And like I said, when we study animals, when we look at animals, we want to compare animals and think of what they have in common that's the same between them, and then we want to see what they have that's different between them. But we don't want to compare random parts like the colors of their eyes, right? We want to compare essential parts. We want to compare their most important parts to really understand the nature of the different animals and what functions they were created for, all right? So that's a short lesson. Chapter 2 takes some time. Right now at the bottom of your notes, write a brief summary of what we studied in Lesson 2. And that's all for Chapter 2 of Book 1 of Aristotle's History of Animals.